And we are back with more Wild Talk. We're joined by Ben Brochu on this segment. Ben just guided UFC legend Leonard Garcia on a moose hunt. We just heard from Leonard the last segment, so let's hear from Ben. Ben, welcome to Wild Talk.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
So, Ben, let's just dive with both feet right into this hunt. How did it come about?
When I was 16 years old, I started baiting for an outfitter who was my English teacher. And then just recently, I decided to go guiding full time. So I was just signed up to guide for a moose hunt, honestly. And then arrived there and met a bunch of real neat guys. And one of them, his ears looked a little off. And I was just feeling like, there's something about this guy. I've seen this before. And sure enough, Leonard was a fighter, and I got to know him really well over the week, and we had a great time.
Oh, when I saw the pictures on your social media, I told Len on the last segment that I fanboyed over him, fangirled, whatever you want to call it. And you didn't even know who he was when I reached out to you. You said, "Oh yeah, found out he was a fighter because I noticed his cauliflower ears," and that made me laugh. So he got a pretty good moose, I would say, especially for a first timer. So how did that hunt look? There was pretty cool stories he got into. I'd like to hear from your point of view.
Yeah, it was actually a pretty hard hunt. The weather was just unseasonably warm for November. We've had a terrible November. I've been guiding all November, and I've never had to work hard for moose like we did this year. His hunt was a dual tag zone. So one of the zones was farmland, one was the deep bush. And we got to do a little bit of each with him. But this was Leonard's. He had hunted, I think, a hog before, but he was a pretty new hunter. And so we did a lot of teaching as we went and, showing them different tracks, showing them what the moose calls were like, even though we were a little bit late on the calling. But it was just a wonderful experience from beginning to end. So he had a couple opportunities on moose earlier on, and the last one all came together. It was actually the last day of the hunt, and he performed well under pressure. So it was pretty cool to see.
Oh yeah, he definitely had high praises for you and the hunt itself. I asked him how it went, and I think he just went for about 15 minutes talking about the experiences, yeah, and the nuances and how much he learned from you. So it was a great experience. What area of Alberta was this hunt in?
And so this was with Plea Hall Frank Lake Guiding Outfitting. So this is the area I grew up near Donnelly in northern Alberta. The lodge is just outside of Donnelly, Alberta, kind of north, about an hour and a half from where I live in DeBolt. And so I know the area very well. So what I guided for bears in there, I did all the baiting from when I was 16 and then guided since I was 18. So this is my old stomping grounds. I grew up in that area, and it was also good. A lot of the farmers there are supportive of the hunting, and so we got to do some farmland, some bush hunting. He got his bull in the farmland, and so it's a different ball game to just a different style of hunting. We saw lots of moose. Some days we saw 15 moose, but we were looking for a bull, and we were looking for one that was ready to stand there for Leonard to get set up, and it worked out wonderful.
Absolutely looked like it did. Yeah, farmland is not something we have too much of here in where I am in northern British Columbia area near Prince George. At least not accessible to hunters. It's a totally different ball game from looking at people's social media for those that are chasing any animals pretty much from the Rockies east. So what you talked about seeing 15 moose in one day. Is that a normal sort of density for Alberta?
I would say we're covering ground on those hunts just because of the weather that we had. If the weather was cold and they're active and moving, they'd be in the cut blocks in the bush, or we could be out, early season, we'd be calling them in. Um, it is a good moose density, and moose numbers are actually doing well. I think it's partially due to increased wolf harvests in that area. There's some of the bush areas are actually a little bit hurting for the moose. A lot of that area that we hunt in there burned this spring. Just a tremendous amount of acres burned up, as you know. And it'll actually be good for the moose hunting probably in a couple of years, but it wasn't good this year. And so it's not unusual in the rut. Like I took Annika, my daughter, deer hunting for 45 minutes after work one day, and we saw 11 moose in 45 minutes, 5 bulls, or it was 12 moose, 12 or 13 actually. So it's possible. And I'm starting with where I know the moose live, right? But it is a good density of moose. It's a good year for moose.
Right. So you had to adapt your tactics from what you normally did, type thing. We had a guest on a couple episodes ago, and we talked about wildfires in British Columbia and Alberta. So yeah, it's no stranger to our show here what wildfire looks like. It needs to look like on the landscape in order to improve habitat and moose and ungulate numbers, for example. So it's a different sort of hunt when you're hunting a post fire. It definitely is, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, and stuff moved around. We saw stuff that we never didn't usually see. Sometimes the muleys were in a different place than they used to be, or the whitetail, or the moose, or the elk. There definitely was some shifting, and some of the game that we saw this year is quite likely that they got shuffled around because of the fires.
And this will segue us perfectly into where I want to go with this next conversation. Is you talked about having your daughter out there, and I've followed you on social media for a few years now, and you're always promoting getting kids into the outdoors. Why is that so important to you?
If we don't invest in the next generation, no matter what it is, we just won't have it. If there's not people who are out there in the wilderness areas in the bush who have a passion and appreciation for wildlife, we're simply going to lose it because um, no people won't know what they're missing. I think there's been a huge disconnect from the land and just what on earth we're here for and what we're a part of and the role we can play in stewardship of that. And that's kind of been the biggest blessing for me of even doing the social media thing. I started out small with our sailing thing and it took off with the trapping. But there were so many people who just didn't even know. I had message after message of people who said, I had this idea of hunters or trappers or fishermen, and then all of a sudden it's become humanized, through the eyes of a child, and all of a sudden they're saying, "How can I be a part of this? How can I go and harvest my own food?" And that's been, it's worth a little bit of effort to share those stories.
I don't think I could have said that any better myself. You said it perfectly. It's about getting the next generation out there, or we're going to lose it. We see it so often on social media and in traditional media that hunters and firearms owners are, for lack of a better term, they're under attack. Not, I don't think it's by anybody, for the most part, willingly saying, hey, this is bad. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. It's that disconnect, as you said, that that kind of distances people from that true field to plate, knowing where their food came from. 100 years ago, our great grandparents they were doing the very thing that we're trying to make socially acceptable now, and it was commonplace. Hell, 30 years ago, I remember seeing seeing deer on the hood of vehicles and in the back of trucks, and you'd be at a gas station and you'd be giving each other high fives and talking about where you got it and what your next hunt looked like. Now you pull into a gas station, you need to kind of look around depending where you are and make sure that you're not having the
I fueled
police
up a
called
few
on
times
you
this
or
year with deer in the back, and it was in our areas we still get more high fives and thumbs up than dirty looks, but there's definitely mixed reviews for sure.
absolutely. It really it's almost disappointing how far we have come, for lack of a better term, in distancing ourselves. And people like yourself that put it out there, I don't want to say in your face, are doing a great job of making it a little more acceptable and bringing people closer to their food. So, have there been any milestones this year? You know where I'm going with this. When I ask if there's been anything spectacular that's happened in your life when it comes to bringing kids into the fold.
Yeah, it's there's been one after another. Honestly, it's been awesome. This spring, Annika got her first bear. That was wonderful. I think she thinks bear hunting is easy because she hunted for 6 minutes before she killed a huge boar. So our kids really don't know, the work that goes in. Well, Silas does most of the work, honestly, and he's pretty kind to his younger siblings. So, yeah, she harvested a nice boar. That was just a great experience to share with her. She got her first deer last year. Was 13 then. She's 14 now. And William, just this week, who just turned 12, and we didn't even help him with his conservation course. He did it all by himself, and he did his own studying, and he took the test, and he passed that, and went and bought his tags. And the next day, we went deer hunting, and same thing. He kind of thinks it's easier than it is, probably, because we walked, a mile and kind of set up in a good location. And we had seen it busted out a deer. He saw it actually in the corner of his eye, and was a doe leaving the field that we had snuck around the corner into. And but I figured the time of year it was probably a buck in tow, so it just grunted a little bit, and the deer grunted back. So got him set up, and literally a minute later, buck comes piling out of the bush at 50 yards, and William actually hadn't even shot his center fire rifle yet. Like, he's good with the 22, he's deadly with the pellet gun, but it was Annika's 6.5, and I basically showed him how to use it. He just shouldered it, boom, poof, you know, dropped the deer right there at 50 yards offhand. He didn't even hesitate. Like, he just on, boom. So William's very different. Like, Annika's more methodical and more deliberate, and William just kind of natural. He's like that with fishing. Like, we were at Sturgeon Lake this summer, and William caught 51 walleye in like an hour and a half. And it's the only person who's ever beat me at fishing is William. And he's a natural. He'll be there eating chips. We were on the ocean fishing halibut in my little inflatable jet boat, and just kind of do it yourself and out there. And Silas would be fishing hard, but he thinks too much, right? He gives William the rod for 1 second. William's got a chip in one hand, coke in the other, and then got a halibut. Just reels it in, and that's always been William. Yeah. We lived on the sailboat. I wake up in the morning, 2 out of 3 mornings with the sound of fish flapping on the deck, and William, squealing with, "Oh yeah, got another one," So yeah, it's what a blessing to be in outdoors with your kids.
No kidding. I know you and I talked. I think it was one night last week. You said, "Oh, I've still got a moose draw that I need to fill, and the kids got deer they need to fill." And I think it was 12 hours later, I got the text from you, go moose down, and you got a moose in that
Yeah, it was the same day we got
And
the
then,
moose and the deer. Actually, yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, so we went out.
yeah,
Basically, you had to wait
yeah,
on legal light to shoot the moose, process the moose, and the day before that, we got 2 whitetail. My fishing buddies from BC were there. They each got a whitetail first day, and then we got the moose, and then they helped me process the moose. 27 minutes later, we had the whole moose parted out in the back of the pickup, and then got home, dealt with the moose, and then went deer hunting that evening because I had to go out guide. So I slipped all this in between 2 different guiding jobs.
talk about the horseshoe, eh? It was absolutely crazy. We got a moose draw I need to fill. 12 hours later, I'm getting the message going, yeah, moose down, and then 8 hours later, whatever it was, you had the
I
deer
kind of
down.
knew where the moose was. I had those on retainer, yeah. But
It sounds like you've had some crazy success this year. Congratulations. So I have a question. You've mentioned this sailboat several times, and I've heard through the grapevine you've had some crazy stories you might be willing to share about this sailboat adventure. What happened?
I don't know about crazy stories. I think the whole thing was just kind of an adventure, beginning to end. I had never sailed until the year that we left, and I had a friend of a friend was buying a sailboat in Seattle and needed extra help to bring it back up to Powell River. So I just hopped on the sailboat. Kind of, that was my first introduction, first time on a sailboat. And then that winter, I bought a little trailer sailor, and then we went on the Sunshine Coast of BC for 10 days. That was kind of a test run. Yeah, it was awesome, and we still really didn't know what we were doing, but basically to see if the kids, we have 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. Uh, when we went to Mexico, they were between the ages of 5 and 11. So basically, long story short, I had been a pastor for a number of years. That was my life. Ready for a break, ready to. It was a good way to kind of transition. We wanted to stay in the community and just get a bit of fresh air and a fresh start. And we bought this boat in Mexico, flew down there, hopped on the boat in Mazatlan, and then we didn't really have good plans. We knew we wanted to explore the Sea of Cortez, but once we got there, we realized that you just don't do that in the winter because they get these strong northers coming in, and the weather's actually cold and rough. So we went, even though we didn't have insurance, we went south down to Banderas Bay, like Puerto Vallarta area. And in the area of La Cruz, there's a whole bunch of boats that are stocked piling up there, ready to go do the puddle jump across the Pacific. So we met a lot of cool people there. There was like seminars on how to do basic stuff, which was super helpful because like when we sailed there, our first sail was like a 250-kilometer overnight sail. And we didn't even know how to unfurl our head sail when we started. So we kind of learned as we went. And then Banderas Bay was a good place to practice, but we would have got stuck in Mazatlan probably. There was this cool lady named Ava from Sweden who had bought a sailboat, went down the rivers to the Atlantic, and then went across the Atlantic, and she ended up sinking it somewhere after crossing the canal. I forget the whole story, but she convinced us, she was on someone else's boat, to just follow them and go down south. So that's what we did. And after we kind of got comfortable there, we crossed the Sea of Cortez to the Baja side, and then went all the way up the Sea of Cortez to the very top at Port of Penasco. And it's amazing. Like, you see these National Geographics with like the whales, with the bait balls, and then the birds are dive bombing them from the top, and the tuna are hunting it from the bottom. And we were in the middle of that. We're trying to homeschool do math, and then there's like, a whale breaches outside of right beside the boat, and you could feel the wake of the whale, as it hit the boat. And we were close, and the sea lions and the fish, and it's something that if for a kid that's normal, but you don't really know how special that is till you live the rest of your life and put it in context.
Can't imagine that. You hear it all the time in regular schools. The dog ate my homework, or I can't come in today. I'm not feeling well. Imagine rolling over and going, well, a whale just splashed my homework. That's actually believable down there.
Yeah.
So what compelled you to just jump on a sailboat with no prior knowledge and say, you know what, I'm doing this?
It's a good question. I think there's people who are dreamers and people who are doers. Like it started out, honestly, I think I had watched some people sailing on YouTube, and I'm like, that seems like a great way to travel that's, relatively inexpensive, because we actually, on the sailboat, we were saving money. Like we were doing better there because we rented out our house. And we were, for my standards, living like kings. We never ate out in restaurants at home, and we could afford it. It's $10, you feed your whole family, and there's nothing to buy but fish and rice. Like once we're up in the top part of the Sea of Cortez, there was no stores anyways. So like we overdid it a little bit on fish at the end because there was no groceries. But it was, we were saving $500 a month, coming out ahead, living in paradise. Like, we took a downgrade in lifestyle to come home, honestly. Yeah. So it was,
That's
it's the sort of thing you don't realize how nonsensical normal life is in terms of rat race and bills and subscriptions and, all these things that you don't need, that really we were living the dream. We had time for people. Like that was one of the most striking things, is the relationships that we developed with the people we met were deeper in 3 months than 3 years of normal life, because you got nothing but time for each other. We did potlucks on the beach, and even getting to know my kid better in 5 months than the previous 5 years. It was a game changer for us. It's hard to go back to that. Silas never did really go back. He went back to normal school, I think, for a year. Then he realized, like, this is cutting into my trapping business and my tanning. And it's like, why spend 8 hours a day going to school when on the sailboat he could do it in 45 minutes and then, pursue his passion.
That's a wicked point. Honestly, some of the best people you meet is out on the ocean as well. I grew up boating all along the Gulf Islands and the coastal desolations down. And you meet the best people, honestly, out on the coast. And you live off the land, you live off the seafood, and you're literally off to sail the seas. And it's the best feeling in the world. Growing up doing that, so your kids are very blessed to do that.
For sure. Oh, that's so awesome. We experienced the exact same thing. Like the kids that we met who were raised on sailboats, like it was stark, the difference of, like, you would see an 8-year-old playing with a 17-year-old. It wasn't weird. And the 8-year-olds could talk to adults, no problem. Like it's a whole different caliber of people because they're raised by people who are interested in people and the natural world, and they have time for you. And we were just so impressed by that. Yeah.
some of the best times in my life I ever had was playing on the beach as a kid up in the Sunshine Coast area. So I know it well. And it's a different lifestyle. You step on the beach there with some of those people, and it becomes friendly. It You're all wanting the same thing, and it's just like hunting. You find a campfire on the beach, you find a campfire in the bush, and you know you're welcome at it. You're sharing that same sort of lifestyle, which is pretty envious there. So you talked about trapping and how you missed it, and quite obviously a large part of what you do is trapping and sharing that to the public, and you do it in a relatable way. You don't scare people away. You don't show anything graphic on your social media. So how did you get involved with that lifestyle?
But trapping was something that I grew up kind of on the fringes of. My highlight of my childhood every year basically was going out to the trap line for my birthday. And I could bring a few friends and we kind of got turned loose with 22s and hunting squirrels and chickens. And, we probably can't do that anymore, but that's how I got an understanding and appreciation. And that was on the trap line. So, people would be, cousins who were there, especially later in the season, we would around the trap and they'd be catching martin and fishers uh, and then when Silas got into it, I figured, okay, we're gonna do this. He was so interested in the same way I was. Like I was very much a self starter. Like I had family involved, but I found the Alberta Trappers Manual at a grad sale, I think, and it's like 1,200 pages. I just inhaled that book. Like, and I learned everything I could find. And when I went to a grad sale, I bought traps. I talked to the old timers. Like Gene Walters is kind of a legend of trapping, and I met him as a kid, and that was instrumental to me because just the real deal, right? And so I gave Silas what I wish I would have had more of. So, and we went probably a little too hardcore because I was working full time, and then we were checking traps twice a week, and we were doing like 180 kilometers of line. So we would be up till 4 in the morning, and the skidoos would be breaking down, and we'd be walking out of the bush at 40 below, and like, but we both were having a good time. Like Silas, I've never heard him say, "I'm cold, I'm tired, I'm hungry." So he's kind of low maintenance. Like I have to realize when I'm guiding clients that not everyone is as low maintenance as Silas, because even as a kid, I didn't have to worry. He was good, and so I think we caught 60 some martin our first time trying, and then we did. Silas started tanning all his own hides, and we catch fisher and yeah, mink and a little bit of everything. And it was cool to watch the effect taking some of those big male fishers. I mean, martin out. All of a sudden, we had more mink, we had more fishers, and they killed the young ones, the big males. And the way we trap, we're intentionally targeting the big males, and we're not over trapping, and we're getting more fur the more we trap if we do it right. And it's really quite interesting to see that. Yeah.
Completely agree. Again, you hit on something there, and it's giving your kids something that you didn't have. And I didn't grow up hunting or trapping. And my daughter is 11 and she's got her hunting license and she comes out with me and loves trapping. It's something, as I said, I didn't have. So I definitely don't force her into it. But I remember for her fifth birthday, I said, "What do you want to do for your birthday?" And she said, well, she's got a September birthday. So she said, "I want to go hunting, fishing, and trapping today." And managed to make that happen. Caught a nice coyote on her birthday and caught a fish. Didn't find anything to hunt. A couple days later, we managed to get a wolf. So it's passing it on to the next generation, and that's so, so critical. I know you've got a pretty cool story about a wolverine, I believe it was, on your trap line.
Yeah, well, that wasn't on my trap line. That would have been on my uncle's trap line up in the Chinchaga, which I don't know if you want to read a good book. Uh, what's it called? Amazon of the North. Joanne Potter wrote a book about their story in the 80s and 90s. They put all their kids through college off that trap line, and my uncle ended up acquiring their hunting business. And but it's a great thing. I think they have two books of their stories up there, and that was some real wilderness back then. And that was my first experience on a legit trap line. And I think I was 13 years old, and it was New Year's Eve, 50 below when we left camp. It's the coldest I've seen it sustain. Like, when it's 40 below and it's crunchy and it gets colder and it's like a whole different level of sounds. And it's hard to explain unless you've been in it. But when it's 50 below, it's different, and the way it feels on when you breathe. Um, but that's how it started out that day. And we ran a lot of line, and as we were going along, there was a wolverine that was killing the lynx in the footholds, and that because of the amount of wolves and wolverines there, they were live trapping the lynx so they could defend themselves, or else they're just gonna, all their lynx are gonna end up eaten. Is basically what ends up happening, and this Wolverine though didn't play by the rules, and he would just kill every lynx and like eat a piece of their liver and move on. So the old trapper that I was with was just, you could just see the pain every time, because it was like $600 a lynx back in the '90s, and that's a big deal. That's why he was out there, right? This was the guy who was trying to make a living, and anyways, eventually the Wolverine made a mistake and got caught in Link's set, which was attached to a poplar drag like 4 feet trunk of poplar. And lynx, even a wolf, coyote, fox, they'll just go for the nearest thicket. They'll get all tangled up in it and then stay. But this Wolverine, again, didn't play by the rules. He went on a snowmobile trail, and we tracked him for 40 miles, and it was solid. And like we were trying to catch up to it while still running the line. I remember I set my first wolf set on the way there as we're pursuing here, and eventually we got close enough that the Wolverine veered off the trail and went in the bush. And Lawrence was the old guy's name, and he's just like, okay, watch, yell at me if the Wolverine loops back on the snowmobile trail, which would kind of make sense to do because there was like 8 feet of powder snow. It was deep, 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 deep snow. Um, so I'm watching for this Wolverine, and he hands me a book of co-op matches and says, make a fire and just wait. You know, long story short, 13 hours later is when he came back. And I remember the little book of co-op matches, and they were old. Like, when paper matches get old and the stuff on the end is just powder? That's what it was. So the first two matches I like broke and powdered because as soon as your hand's off 50 below, your hands are freezing, right? So fortunately, I had enough sense. Okay, kind of slow it down. Last match, okay, I got to need a strategy. So I found some nice little clean twigs off the bottom of the spruce tree because it was so still when it's that cold that all the trees were just like they looked like snow cones, right? They're just all fluffy with snow. And then we'll dip that in the gas tank of the snowmobile, and then made myself a little tinder fire. And then that last match sparked enough because basically the match wouldn't light, but the fluff of the whatever the end, match end would got the match lit, get a fire going, all the while looking for this Wolverine, And then hours go by, and hours go by, and hours go by, and my snow's melting into the ground, because I didn't have a big enough platform because I know that now, but I was 13 years old still going further and further, trying to find dry wood, try not to get wet, try not to get too sweaty. And then what had happened is the Wolverine got free from the trap because it was that cold out, and it was frozen, and he was able to get out of the trap. And it came at him, and it basically set an ambush for him. He shot it with his 22 250, which is what he carries for wolves, because sometimes you see a wolf on a trap line, but he only got one shot because he probably had some oil on his gun, which at 50 below is not a good idea, and it froze, firing pin froze. And then he had a 22 revolver inside his coat. And as this Wolverine was coming at him, he shot at close range 3 more times, and then killed the Wolverine and came out dragging that 13 hours later. I'll always remember that day because we caught a lynx that wasn't eaten after this line. The rest were, but we also caught a fisher, a marten, and a wolf. I caught my first wolf on that foothold set that I had set away on the way, and just a blind set. So that was, definitely a day you won't forget.
That's an insane story. Holy. So, I would like to get into, we've talked about you being in BC, we've talked about you being in Mexico, we've talked about you guiding in Alberta. I'd like to talk about the Arctic and how you stepped foot up there and what you did.
Yeah, that was a really unique opportunity. So when I came back from sailing, would have been 2019. That was finally my first chance to guide full time. I'd already always done some guiding, but I'd be taking holidays for it, and then so I guided for one outfitter, and then basically ran myself out of work by tagging out. And then my one hunt got canceled. So I called Kevin McNeil, who is from McLennan Blue Sky Outfitters. And he's like, sure, I'll put you to work. You're going to guide for waterfowl. I'd only hunted for waterfowl once. And I'm like, sure, I'll guide for waterfowl. And I was guiding the world champion goose callers that week. And so I didn't really need to provide the expertise. It was just awesome to watch their work, their magic. And then, so I guided for him that season. And then the next summer, they own Alamo Lake Lodge up in the Northwest Territories. And you're right on the Barren Lands. You're close to the Thalon Wildlife Sanctuary. You're almost at the Nunavut border. And it's so far from Yellowknife that only 2 of the Air Tindies planes can go that far and get back on the fuel. But there's a reason it's worth going, because it's just amazing. It's untouched. Like, there's never even been First Nation settlements in that community. It's just out there. So they're still, like, as we're fishing guiding up there, we're charting the lake on their Hummingbird chart plotters, because we don't have charts for the lake. They don't exist. So there'll be rock spires in the middle of nowhere, and we're exploring. I always try to push my luck and want to go a little bit further. I'm like, we'll be back. I'm trying to find some clients out there who can do like a hop skip, like basically go for a week and don't come back to camp. But the Barren Ground Grizzlies they're like a polar bear. They don't care. Like, they have no fear. They won't be shooed off. So you have to be aware of that. So I started out there fishing guiding, and then this last year, Kevin and Patty have been working hard to get muskox tags. And before their tags even came through, they had the world record at their lodge, because one of the pilots there had asked Kevin if he could stay and hunt there, and he just picked one that looked good. And if I remember right, I don't even think it was the biggest one in the herd. He was trying to get a nice cape and the nice fur, and he just picked the one that looked nicest, and that was the world record. So we've seen the world record muskox there, that because he's on the edge of his zone or whatever. There were some that are on the other side of the river. We watched all season that were world records that we just watched. One of them was injured and was going to be wolf bait, but we just had to watch him. So it was a really unique experience out there, and I'm planning to do it again. Now they have permits for wolf and wolverine up there. I'd like to do that this winter / spring. February, March is a good time to do it out there. And they're working on the caribou as well. It was originally a caribou camp, and the caribou tags got pulled, and that's why they bought it and turned it into a fishing lodge.
Okay, that's crazy. So you touched on bears a little bit. Did you get any encounters up there, or how did that go?
Yeah, one of the first things you notice in the lodge is in the kitchen. There's like 2 large red paw prints on the counter, because they had a bear break in when they weren't there, and it spilled some kerosene, I think, and the floor had been painted red, so the kerosene dissolved the paint. So there was paw prints all over the lodge from this grizzly bear in the kitchen, in the storage room, whatever. And they washed most of them off except 2, just to kind of leave as a souvenir. But no, they've definitely had some problems, because once a grizzly finds the camp, they don't really want to leave, because it's like Disneyland for them, right? There's all these new smells and sights, and it's pretty attractive. But yeah, bears have been a constant, and really is my specialty. And that's what I started with, the bear baiting when I was 16 and watching the bears. And I've had some encounters with grizzlies on hiking, rafting trips in my own yard. We had a grizzly encounter. So it's definitely, it's part of the business. It's something I have a respect for bears. I used to be kind of foolish, to be honest. And you have a couple close calls, and you're like, okay, yeah, you win, yeah. And that's how Silas is. I'm coaching him because he does most of the work bear baiting, but he basically, he has one of them in terms of the bears. Like, he's very comfortable with them. They're very comfortable with him. And I tease him. He's kind of gone full circle by the age of 16, where, rifle hunting, compound bow, traditional bow. Like, his last one, he shot at 8 yards on the ground. He didn't even shoot one at all last year, because there's Frank the Tank, which is just this monstrous bear that he wasn't settling for anything less. And he almost got Frank a few times, but no one else even sees Frank except this one guy that we had this spring. Hats off Frank, but he's too smart. He'll go in, poke his head around the corner. Oh, someone in the stand, back up. And so we got to try moving stands and stuff for him. But we've been feeding him for 3 years, and he's just getting huge. Like, he rolls out of the den, robs all our bait, and then goes back and does it again next year. So
That's a good way to put it. Is a healthy respect for bears. I was kind of the same way a bunch of years ago. Is this you push that envelope a little bit, and then one day it just kind of clicks on you that it's probably playing with fire a little bit there. You mentioned polar bears real quickly. Was that a hunt that you guided, or was it just
I
something you
haven't done
saw?
polar bears. No, like we've up in the Arctic where I guide, we have the barren ground grizzly, but we're too far from the ocean for the polar bears for the most part. But that definitely would something I'd love to do. I've met, we've taken groups of youth in my previous job when I was working with youth and as a pastor. We did a bunch of stuff up with the First Nations in the Arctic and Tuktoyaktuk up there, and definitely met some old polar bear guides. And it's something. Again, you can have all sorts of romantic ideas about wolves or about polar bears, but when you're connected with the people who live there on the land, it's an animal like anything else, worthy of respect. Uh, but they'll still eat you. Like they're just doing what they're doing. It's not good, bad, or otherwise. It just is what it is.
Yeah, they have a place on the landscape, and just as we mentioned, you need to respect them. I was going to ask if you had any hate from dealing with a polar bear hunt, but you seem to have you didn't have to deal with that because you didn't hunt them. So
No, wolves bring out the most hate. We've had some pretty gnarly stuff, but it's a minority, and I've learned to deal with it. Like my kids don't have social media; they won't. Silas, even though he's 16, he's not on there. He's not reading it because there's so much overwhelmingly positive stuff. But there's just some people who don't know. Like my Facebook page, Hinterland Outdoors, has been taken off twice already, and it's been both when I've shared something about wolves. I've got even Facebook itself upheld a hate speech ruling against me. I was flagged for hate speech, and then I appealed it, and Facebook ruled in favor of it. And it wasn't hate speech; it was dead wolf, is what the complaint was triggered by. And it was a group of people who made a concerted effort to take my page down, and they were successful for a while. And it's still demonetized.
yeah, I've had that before with personal pictures on my social media. I don't share wolf anymore or bear. Very rarely do I share bear pictures, simply because the way things work, it's they're going to flag you, they're going to ping you, they're going to suspend you, etc., etc. But that's one thing I do notice about your social media. It's very rare do you have any hate. Occasionally, you'll get an upset react or a sad face or an angry react, but very rare do you see
It's been very
a
good. Yeah.
targeted attack on you like you see on some pages. So you you do it well. So before we wrap it up, I want to know if you were to try and pick your favorite story to tell, whether it be sailing, guiding, trapping, fishing, anything. You got one in mind?
I don't know. It really depends what the topic is and who I'm telling because I don't even really remember. Like one of the things I like about guiding is you're meeting new people all the time and you're just explaining your way of life. And as you're talking about one thing, it'll remind you about something that you completely forgot about. Like I- I'll forget some of the things that I've done, and that's why I started taking the pictures and stuff. Like I started taking videos for my YouTube channel, really just to be able to show my kids. I did these packcraft trips, and one of the that'll always stick with me. We went on, if you look up Wood River Expedition, we wanted to run a river that had never been run before. We've done a number of these since, but we kind of only knew enough to be dangerous. And we got into the headwaters of the Wood River. We had to hike into Fortress Lake, paddle the lake, and the long and short of it is we lost our boats, we punctured our boats, we lost our food. You know, it was supposed to be a 5 day trip. It took 11 days. And we ran into bears and we almost drowned and hypothermia and lost gear. And it was a formative thing to it's interesting though that it took away any fear of running out of food. Like I packed less backpacking than I did before because I know what it's like to go hungry, and I know I was fine. After a couple of days, you're burning fat. Like I lost 13 pounds in the last 5 days, you know, and my knee was in bad shape. We ate blueberries and like it was. But my friend Luke, and he bugs me about it, but I remember that as a positive trip. Like we had good times on that trip. We had fun, we laughed, but we also stared death in the face. And when you do that, it takes away the edge of it because I know how I'm going to react when I'm staring right into the eyes of death. And if I wouldn't have caught one little branch at one point, I don't think it would have gone the same way because we were in a gorge where the we had every possible dry bag, and the stuff that went through those gorges and canyons was destroyed and wet no matter what it was in, and it was inside of a airtight boat. It was airtight at one point, and it's some gnarly stuff where you go look up and you can see the river a couple hundred yards above you, and the river disappears at some points. Like, we had done our research to the best of our ability, but it wasn't nearly good enough for what we're undertaking. Like, after the pictures kind of went viral from that trip and we had people contact us. So yeah, we tried to make a trail in there through 1983 with helicopter support, and we gave up after months of work. So we were trying to hike through there with pack rafting gear and full packs. And that's why we ended up paddling stuff we really shouldn't have been paddling, because the portaging was nearly impossible. And that trip's never been done since. And I don't think it will, because it's just a bad idea.
I think that's an absolutely perfect way to end this segment with you, Ben. You stare death in the face. Nobody else has been able to do that trip since. So there's no better story we could tell on that. I think that was a great way to do it there, Ben. So thanks for joining us on Wild Talk. We'll chat soon.
Thanks for having me.